Welcome to episode 160 of the 4Ps, and the end is here. Well, not that end. Maybe I should say an end is here. You remember a year ago when everyone was keen to remind you that we're in this together? It's now been approximately 500 days since coronavirus reached our shores and changed the world as we know it. And it continues to change, but this time for the better. Albeit more slowly than it probably could and should. But we've made it to the end of yet another COVID-impacted school year, and since the 4Ps schedule has always aligned to the academic calendar, I'm both excited and disappointed to inform you, my dear viewer, that we have reached the end of Season 3 of the 4Ps.
The 4Ps. Professional. Political. Practical. Personal.
These past 40 episodes of this video, the accompanying newsletter, and now even podcast, there have been 160 Ps this season. That is, if you're counting. And we covered a broad range of topics, from blockchain and boycotts and books to procrastination and pollen, a presidential election, natural selection, mask management, task management, time management. You've experienced my half-hearted attempt to create a midlife crisis. You survived months of stir craziness where I didn't even leave my house. But unlike the first two seasons, where these were created literally all over the world, from London to the Bay, from Paris to Palm Beach, this was done all from right here, quarantine headquarters on Long Island. But now we'll pause for summer hiatus, a time to recharge the mental engine, reemerge into society. I'll research new ways and ideas to entertain and inform you. For Season 4, we'll reset these algorithms and rethink the overall approach. That's 5 R's. But before that, here are 4 last Ps to peruse and enjoy. Starting with something personal. And there's a lot of talk about this summer being a return to normal. And while I support the optimistic sentiment, it'll only really be normal once we stop thinking about or talking about or asking what is normal ever again. And it's not going to be this summer. That said, there are many, many things that will be and will feel like and already have begun to emulate how things were before, and I'm excited for all of them. Last week I went to my first in-person Mets game at Citi Field, and I have tickets to probably a dozen more games this summer. Watching Jacob deGrom, starting pitcher, pitch when healthy this year has been one of the real highlights of my entire life as a sports fan. And if he can keep up this historical dominance and unprecedented output, that would probably be anything but normal. So what else? The kids, they'll be at camp. Day camps will be in full swing. Sleepaway camps are back in session. And children all over the United States will forget so much of what the past masked indoor year was ever like. So let the unmasking continue. Except for when they're indoors. Because without kids being fully vaccinated and these variants continuing to spread amongst the unjabbed, including all kids under 12, masking indoors for children has to continue in most circumstances. So that's still anything but normal, if you ask me. As we conclude another Pride annual celebration of, by, for, and with the LGBTQ community, the displays of rainbow flags on lawns and storefronts have been more prominent than they ever were before, which is great. But it's also impossible to ignore the many states, the many regions whose transgender laws continue to stymie equality. Violence and hate crimes continue. And these limitations on personal freedom and ongoing pervasiveness of discrimination make it impossible for far too many people to live quote-unquote normal lives. And speaking of rainbows, I have pledged to focus even more time on the pop-up turned somewhat viable business that we've created, making unicorn-themed t-shirts and other apparel with my daughter. Now, creating a small business and watching her curiosity, her creativity, even her wisdom flourish in this way has been nothing short of extraordinary. And while most small businesses ultimately do fail, I'm hopeful that her vision plus my intermediate marketing experience can turn this side business into something of a unicorn abnormal success story. And then finally this summer, I'm looking forward to spending more quality time with my family. This time with young kids who still want to be with us and hang out with us, I realize it's limited. We've got a double-digit age child now and another one not far behind. So what do we have planned? Birthday parties and boat rides, playing in the pool, playing sports. I've even finalized those details of that first father-son road trip next month. So if I'm able to successfully partition the professional and external distractions from this personal time when we are all together, I guess at this point that too would be anything but normal. Something professional. As the integration, the merger, the assimilation of revelation into Jellyfish advances through these final operational steps this summer, I'm going to find myself with a rare and unique, in a position that I haven't been in a long time, with time and opportunities to take on new responsibilities and learn new skills. Now, anyone who works in or around the marketing industry will tell you that the rapid rate of change that we experience requires ongoing investments in personal and professional development in order to just keep up. I did this several years ago and evolved my skill set over time, adding creative tools, then platform knowledge, then again with operational and management and leadership skills. But this ocean of opportunity in which we as Jellyfish are now swimming is vast, and there's still a lot more that I don't know and don't really feel comfortable with yet. A lot that I haven't learned or not yet mastered in a number of unexplored areas. I've always had a professional curiosity and it's always been high, but you couple that now with some open road out in front of me, and I'm excited about what this summer could mean and how it's going to shake out. There are two themes that have always resonated with me. If you go back and look at just my resume and things that I've stood for, it's convergence of opportunities and then construction. Right? Seeing how things can and should come together and then building the right model to scale for success. So looking at Jellyfish's menu of products and services that we offer for clients, as well as just the industry as a whole, with that, a few ideas are starting to come into focus. The first is the convergence of technology and talent. In the creative business, innovation and ideation, that happens where technology and talent intersect. So what technology do creatives need to be more creative? Is it better access to audience data? Is it better ways to measure what creative resonates and drives business objectives? Is it just better connecting creatives from across the world to collaborate faster and easier and better? For me, this comes down to more than just recruiting and resourcing and reporting, which, if you're counting, is 3 more R's. Another idea is the convergence of management and leadership. And while these two words are often used interchangeably, as I've even talked about here repeatedly, they're two sides of the same coin. Some businesses understand the difference and others don't. One area that sits in the middle of the two is mentorship, which doesn't always require direct line management, but enables experienced leaders and managers to provide guidance, direction, support within the context of growth and development. Another idea, the convergence of marketing and marketing. Very few companies in the marketing industry actually eat their own dog food. We talk a lot about the positive feedback loop that we develop with and for our clients, right? Data, insights, strategy, content and creation, distribution, measurement, and optimization. But how many agencies, consultancies, service partners, tech platforms actually do this for themselves? Whatever that number is, a far smaller number actually do it well. Another theme, the convergence of content and context. And this is a story that I've been working on and writing for years now. But a few things have changed. The delivery platforms are faster. There are more of them. Consumer tolerance for error is actually lower, but the demand for diversity is higher. So selectivity, prioritization, it's never mattered more than when it comes to creating and delivering content, the place, the time, the ability to actually deliver on the right tone. Another theme, the convergence of openness and fairness, which are not the same things. When digital marketing and media platforms are the most powerful, most leveraged, yet least regulated and least trusted institutions maybe on the planet, the onus falls on those creating the messages to use these communication vehicles properly. In addition to brand and marketing content, these platforms are some of the biggest funders and monetizers of hate speech and disinformation. So branded content that's placed in some of the worst places on the internet without marketers knowing it or at least aware of it, or the fact that it's adjacent to some of this stuff that you don't want to necessarily be associated with. I don't have an answer to this, but at least we're now aware of the challenge, the problem. So a couple more. The convergence of professional geology and geography. So geology, we know what that is, right? It's the accumulated study of structures and substance, their history, the processes that act on it in nature. But professional geology is like a similar framework, right? It goes back decades. It's the study of structures and substance and the forces that act on it. Institutionalized ways of working that have barely changed over decades, centuries, that while they can provide stability for companies and industries, may also inhibit or preclude growth and innovation. We see how advances in technology and society create stratified or conglomerate layers, which in mineral geology look like different layers of rocks and colors and substances. But there are other factors. My company and so many others now are pushing the boundaries of boundaries. Thousands of my colleagues and partners are working in dozens of locations. We're in 50 different locations as a company, collaborating every day. So how do we create a culture of subcultures? What's working? What's not? Why? How? More has changed in the past 18 months than in the past 50 years. But not everyone adapts in the same ways. And then the last theme is the convergence of divergent purposes, with a greater emphasis on many types of purposes of different kinds, things that mean different things to different people, different principles, goals, ideals that matter to each of us. That all remains very diverse based on a number of factors: where we come from, how we were raised, what's happening in our families and in our communities. And in many cases, those purposes are increasingly polarizing. Whereas a focus on the environment or equality or equity may resonate with many individuals and even brand goals, we know that those values can also turn off lots of people as well. But staying on the sidelines as a brand marketer is a recipe for failure. If company values embody the values of employees, plus the values of their constituents, their customers, consumers, we have to realize that we can never please all the people all the time and do what we think is right. Something practical. Several years ago at a work conference, I found myself seated at a table with Arianna Huffington, and it was right after she sold the Huffington Post to AOL for, it was like $315 million. And someone at the table asked her what she's going to do with all of her free time now. At what point she just laughed and began to spout out a daunting yet impressive list of things that were already occupying her brain at the time. One of which, and it was memorable for me, and I still think about because it's something I have a fascination with, is this idea of sleep and the concept of restfulness. Now, we know, right, that a regular, unhealthy sleep patterning is one of the curses of an active brain. I've talked about it many times with my doctor over the years, and our mutual concern finally reached the level where he just prescribed for me a sleeping aid, and a strong one at that, for the first time ever. I'm reluctant to try it since my wife was quite mortified at the dosage he recommended. I think she said that it could knock out a horse for a week. So I haven't tried it yet. Instead, I'm focusing on the idea of other ways to approach and achieve restfulness. As always, one of my favorite ways to rest is find a good book. And bringing those two things together, restfulness and reading, meant it was only a matter of time before I picked up and read The Art of Rest by Claudia Hammond. The stresses that we feel, hectic family schedules, the broader world around us, they can take their toll. Inertia is not just a physical force, but a mental one as well. An object in motion, like our brains, will stay in motion. Even when we have time to pause, I feel this nagging sense of guilt or pressure that I should be using my time more productively, which isn't healthy either. Stress also tends to interrupt sleep with damaging health consequences. I'm pretty sure that there's no magic formula or trick to getting a healthy night's sleep on a consistent basis, but it's something that I think we can carve away at if we really understand opportunities or think about things a little bit differently. So that's why this book was so valuable for me. Well, last weekend I did have a few days away and a change of scenery, so I brought with me The Art of Rest to learn how to incorporate more of that restfulness into my life. The book not only shares the results of the largest study ever conducted on rest, it's called the REST test, but provides useful insights into which activities people find most restful. This then could provide us with a list of areas in which we can focus. It's not exactly my summer to do nothing list, but it does provide us with, again, just a practical set of goals or ideas. The first is be okay with doing nothing. Of the more than, I think it was nearly 20,000 responses to the REST test, one of the most popular restful activities listed in the book isn't really much of an activity at all. It's do nothing. Doing nothing in particular is a popular restful activity, but people still find it difficult. It may not be a respected way to pass the time based on current social norms, not to mention health risks if this non-activity becomes excessive. But there are some encouraging benefits for would-be doers of nothing. Inactivity can have a positive influence on our creativity. It can help to improve your memory or just slow down your thoughts if you're able to really carve out time to do nothing. The study clearly differentiates this solution from doing almost nothing, like knitting or reading or drawing or doing a puzzle, from actually doing nothing. The next thing to do to find relaxation is listening to music. And in the REST test, listening to music was the fourth most popular restful activity. We all know the restorative, positive impacts that music can have on our physical and mental well-being, but not just any music. Listening to slow music is relaxing, as long as you like the song or it's not too complex a beat. And different music actually affects our moods differently. Fast music in a major key is more likely to spark excitement, whereas slow, dissonant music in a minor key is associated with just reflection. Restful music isn't limited to generic relaxation playlists on YouTube or Spotify. The criteria are in fact much simpler. The music shouldn't be too fast or too complex, and most importantly, you should like it. Another restful idea is to just spend some time alone. While not a specific activity per se, small doses of alone time can be restful as long as you choose the place and time, when it's within your own control. As with doing nothing in particular, being alone is only relaxing in certain situations. For alone time to be restful, you also have to recognize it as such and do it on your own terms. It's not about escaping people or work or commuting or the commitments and nagging obligations. Taking a little time for yourself actually lets you listen to your emotions and reflect on who you are. Removed from the pressures, the strains, the judgments imposed by others. And doing so without imposing any of our own pressures on ourselves during this time, wow, can that be restful. Another idea, being in nature. The peacefulness of nature is classically associated with restfulness, and listening to birds, watching trees, the branches sway, feeling a breeze dance across your skin. They all have the capacity to soothe our troubles and our spirits. My wife likes to look at the water. She says it relaxes her. It's science. Researchers at Stanford use brain scanners to measure activity in our brain both before or after spending 90 minutes in nature. That could be a walk or maybe physical activity, whatever it is. But we saw before and after the change in brain activity. Of course, whether or not you find nature restful depends on who you are or what meaning you associate with even specific or certain landscapes. For me, thinking of the park where I played in growing up is very restful, whereas I don't find the ocean to be as relaxing. And then reading. A lot of you read this newsletter, you read books. Some of you may be doing it in addition to listening to this or watching this right now. In the Rest Test, 58% chose reading as their top means of finding rest. It's the best way to fall back asleep when waking up in the middle of the night, and it certainly works better than meditation or watching Netflix for me. Unlike late night screen time, reading before bed isn't linked to poorer sleep quality. So even when reading can be more cognitively demanding and requires thought or not turning off your brain, stress levels and blood pressure drops, like these things are relaxing because we have the most control over the experience. You can read at your own pace. You can choose what to read. Instead of tidying up your thoughts, it adds new ones, which can be restful or not depending on what it is that you're reading. So look, we're all different. We prioritize different things, but prioritizing the right kind of restfulness, as well as focusing on the rest itself, is key. Even if pressed for time, incorporating shorter moments of restfulness or micro breaks is encouraged. But if you become so preoccupied with getting enough rest that it starts to cause you stress, time to reevaluate. And finally, we're going to end this season's 4 Ps with something political. Last week, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand introduced a new bill. It was the Data Protection Act of 2021. Actually, it was more of a renewed bill that failed to pass from the last session of the 116th Congress, but there are some updates. With Democrats now holding slim majorities in both houses of Congress, Gillibrand knows that there's potentially a limited window of opportunity for this kind of legislation, even with the Senate's filibuster protocol stymieing a lot of other legislation. Her bill builds on the previous version in ways that align with the Biden administration's agenda, taking on the biggest tech companies around. So why is this notable? The bill would establish a federal data protection agency, a DPA, which many in both parties believe is necessary, though they disagree on how much or how such an agency could and should even work. The agency's role would be to regulate and enforce federal data privacy laws. The bill also outlines some prohibited data collection and usage practices, including those that are discriminatory or deceptive, and bans re-identifying users from de-identified data. In addition to provisions in the bill, this new bill would establish the following provisions, among others. 1, enable the DPA to review big tech mergers that involve the data transfer or data aggregators. I'll get to that in a second. Number 2, it establishes the Office of Civil Rights within the DPA. And 3rd, grants the DPA enforcement authority for high-risk data practices. And then last, it establishes fines and penalties for any unlawful or unfair, deceptive, abusive, discriminatory practices. So what that means is that the new agency would be able to review privacy implications of any merger that includes the transferring of data of 50,000 users or more, like Facebook and Instagram's merger or AT&T and Time Warner. That review would then be sent to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Justice to be used in determining whether or not these mergers should go through. Right now, those decisions are basically just being made in a vacuum. Regarding the discriminatory practices, there's currently no one agency responsible for overseeing those violations. So that's a good thing. Many believe that the FTC has dropped the ball on data privacy, imposing symbolic but ultimately meaningless fines against big tech companies that are essentially slaps on the wrist. The financial implications are meaningless. $1 million to Facebook? Come on. The FTC has a new lead, Lena Khan, who rose to prominence as a big tech critic and an antitrust expert. And her appointment reflects that the Biden administration wants to prioritize those antitrust matters, as do lawmakers in both parties and both houses of Congress. The current data privacy laws just aren't enough and don't reflect how the digital ecosystem actually works. But this is an instance where they just can't agree on how to address the problem. So federal privacy bills have historically gone nowhere. And this may not go anywhere either, but at least there's reason to hope this summer. So we'll see. And that's it for now. In the meantime, I wish you all a great few weeks of relaxation, contemplation, productivity, and enjoyment. I'll probably have a few midsummer thoughts to share here over the weeks to come, including potentially an Olympics-themed 4Ps. We'll see. And then I'll be back, before you know it, Season 4 of the 4Ps with some upgrades and some changes, something to look forward to. In the meantime, take care, be well, and keep in touch.